From betrayed dragon gods to entire kingdoms drowned in seconds. Dark Souls isn't just difficult, it's deliberately horrifying, and most players never notice. These are the most disturbing mysteries hidden in Dark Souls. Seath's experiments. Seath the Scaleless wasn't born a monster, he became one through jealousy and obsession. This dragon betrayed his own kind to help Gwyn win the war, and his reward was a fragment of a lord's soul in a research facility in the Duke's archives where he could do whatever he wanted with zero oversight. What he wanted was immortality, and the scales he never had. So he started kidnapping maidens from Anor Londo for arcane experiments that went way beyond unethical. The Pisaka enemies you fight in the archives aren't random monsters, they're those kidnapped women mutated into octopus-headed nightmares that can barely move. Item descriptions confirm these were Gwyn's own handmaidens, meaning the Lord of Sunlight knew about this and did nothing. Seath was creating hybrids, trying to birth something that combined dragon and human, which is how we got Priscilla, the half-dragon girl locked away in the Painted World. The implications are exactly as horrible as you think. Forced breeding experiments that combine species through methods the game never explicitly states, but heavily suggests, through environmental storytelling. These weren't scientific trials, they were torture sessions that lasted years, maybe decades. Also, one insecure dragon could prove he deserved the scales he was born without. And when you finally kill Seath, he doesn't drop some dramatic monologue about his research, he just goes hollow like everyone else, meaning all that suffering accomplished absolutely nothing. But Seath's madness was at least confined to one location. The next mystery spread its horror across an entire family unit, turning love into something unrecognizable. Pinwheel's fusion. Pinwheel looks like a joke boss, the easiest fight in the entire game that most players accidentally one-shot. But the lore behind this shambling necromancer is pure nightmare fuel that turns that quick victory into something uncomfortable. The name Pinwheel comes from the Japanese version where he's called three-person Pinwheel, and the mask he wears shows three faces twisted together. He was a catacombs gravekeeper who lost his wife and child, then tried using necromancy to resurrect them because grief does terrible things to people with access to dark magic. Except the resurrection didn't work the way he planned, and instead of bringing them back separately, the spell fused all three of them into one body. The father, mother, and daughter are now permanently bound together in one grotesque form, sharing the same physical space, but maintaining separate consciousnesses. Imagine being aware of yourself, but also feeling your dead wife and child merged into your flesh, unable to separate, unable to die properly, just existing as this three-headed abomination guarding a tomb for eternity. Boss fight music is this slow, mournful dirge, because you're not fighting evil. You're fighting a family trapped in a failed resurrection that went so wrong, it created something that shouldn't exist. And the masks he drops, the father, mother, and child masks, each one carries a fragment of their original faces, meaning some part of their individual identities is still trying to push through the fusion. That's personal horror though, family tragedy on an intimate scale. But what happens when an entire community gets infected with something that turns humans into walking incubators? Blighttown's parasites. Blighttown isn't just poorly optimized hell with single-digit frame rates. It's a quarantine zone for a parasite outbreak that turned miners into egg-laying hosts. The guys you see with giant egg sacs where their heads should be aren't wearing weird helmets. Those are parasite clusters that replace their skulls and turn them into reproductive chambers for mutant larvae. These miners were working in the swamp when they got infected with something that burrowed into their heads and started laying eggs. The Daughters of Chaos, the spider ladies serving Quelag, were supposedly helping by sucking out the infection, but that just transferred the parasites to them and eventually turned them into the demons you fight in Lost Izalith. The darts that the blowgun snipers shoot at you aren't normal poison. Item descriptions reveal their crystallized humanity. These weren't enemy combatants. They were workers who got infected and then got abandoned in a swamp while their heads slowly transformed into burst egg sacs that spray larvae everywhere. You can actually find intact egg clusters lying around Blight, and if you look close, you can see the movement inside, little slug shapes pressing against the membrane. The worst part is the egg vermifuge item that cures the infection if you get it, because that means there was enough knowledge about this parasite to create a cure, but nobody bothered using it to save the miners. They just sealed off Blighttown and let the infection run its course, turning an entire labor force into incubators. But parasite horror stays mostly in one location. What happens when an entire kingdom wakes up something that warps human bodies into configurations that shouldn't be possible? Ulaseel's mutation. Ulaseel was a peaceful kingdom known for healing magic and light sorceries, right up until they dug up Manus and woke the Father of the Abyss. Then, it became a testing ground for what happens when humanity gets exposed to concentrated darkness without any filter. The bloathead enemies aren't wearing masks or armor. Those are their actual heads, swollen to 3 times normal size and covered in eyes and mouths that grew in places faces shouldn't have openings. These were normal citizens who got caught in the Abyss spread when Manus woke up, and their bodies just started mutating, flesh expanding and reconfiguring while they stayed conscious through the whole transformation. The DLC shows this wasn't instant instant. You can find corpses in various stages of mutation, some barely affected, others already too far gone to recognize as human. Their skulls cracked open to accommodate new eyes, skin stretched until it split and revealed clusters of teeth that grew from inside the tissue. And they're still trying to perform their old routines, shambling through streets they used to walk normally, reaching for things they can't quite remember. Elizabeth the Mushroom mentions they were good people before the darkness came, which means every bloathead you kill was probably someone's neighbor or family member before Ulukyle decided poking an ancient evil was a good research opportunity. Dusk, princess you rescue, is one of the only survivors who didn't mutate, and she's permanently traumatized by watching her entire kingdom transform into eye-covered abominations while she hid in a crystallized sanctuary. That's mutation through external corruption. But what about deliberate choices, when a city makes a calculated decision to sacrifice everyone inside for the greater good? New Lundo. New Lundo. Ruins isn't just an abandoned city. It's a mass grave where the entire population drowned at once because the leaders decided flooding the city was the only way to stop the dark wraiths from spreading. 4 kings fell to the abyss. Their knights became soul-stealing invaders, and the solution wasn't to fight them directly, but to just open the floodgates and let the ocean rush in while everyone was still inside. The ghosts you fight aren't mindless monsters. They're the residents who died in the flooding, still wearing their civilian clothes, still clutching their belongings, still trying to defend homes that don't exist anymore. The city wasn't evacuated. There was no warning. The sealers just broke the dam and let physics do the work. Item descriptions mention the curse that lets you hit ghosts was distributed after the flooding, meaning the survivors knew they'd created an army of vengeful spirits and prepared countermeasures instead of, not drowning an entire city. The architecture is intact, buildings still standing, because this wasn't a siege or invasion that destroyed infrastructure. It was a deliberate execution where the weapon was water and the casualties were every man, woman, and child who happened to be home that day. And the Dark Wraiths? Still down there? Because flooding doesn't actually kill abyss-corrupted knights, so thousands died for a containment strategy that didn't even work. Those are atrocities born from desperate situations, though. What happens when the horror isn't survival instinct, but pure appetite? Aldrich's consumption. Aldrich started as a cleric, rose to sainthood through holy deeds, and then discovered he had an appetite for human flesh that no amount of prayer could suppress. So instead of fighting it, he just leaned in and started eating people until his body couldn't maintain solid form anymore, and he became a living puddle of digesting sludge. He ate so many people that he stopped being human entirely, his body breaking down into this mobile ooze that absorbed whatever it consumed while keeping the consciousness intact. Then he graduated from eating regular people to eating gods, specifically targeting Gwyndolin and Anor Londo because apparently divine flesh hits different. When you fight him in Dark Souls 3, half of Gwyndolyn's body is still hanging out of Aldrich's sludge form, getting slowly digested while technically still alive. The arena is covered in his trail, this thick residue that shows his movement pattern, and if you look close, you can see partially dissolved body parts in the slime. His lore mentions dreams of a deep-sea age where everything drowns in dark water, which means he's not just eating for hunger, he's got an apocalyptic vision where consumption becomes the universal state. He devoured so many people that the cathedral started worshipping him as a saint of appetite, building entire rituals around his feeding schedule. The deacons you fight are his priests, keeping him fed with a steady supply of sacrifices, treating cannibalism like a religious calling. And Aldrich isn't even the final form. Item descriptions suggest he's still growing, still absorbing, working his way through every god he can reach until there's nothing left but sludge. But at least Aldrich was his own person making terrible choices. What about when the horror comes from betrayal? When someone you trusted decides you're worth more as a meal? The executioner who worked alongside the Dragon Slayer protecting Anor Londo's cathedral? His hammer description reveals his cannibalistic tendencies. He ground the bones of executed victims into his own feed, which prevented him from ever joining Gwyn's elite 4 knights. Smaug was Ornstein's partner, the executioner who worked alongside the Dragon Slayer protecting Anor Londo's cathedral. His hammer description reveals his cannibalistic tendencies. He ground the bones of executed victims into his own feed, which prevented him from ever joining Gwyn's elite 4 knights. All these mysteries, though, they're hidden in lore and item text. What about the horror that's mechanical, built directly into the gameplay as a trap? Mimic chests. Mimics aren't just enemy types, they're From Software's direct commentary on player greed, wrapped in a monster that eats you with a chest cavity full of teeth. These things look exactly like treasure chests until you get close enough. Then they sprout legs and a mouth full of skeletal fingers arranged like fangs. The design is deliberately cruel, punishing the natural instinct to grab loot by turning it into a death trap that can one-shot you if you're not careful. And they're not mindless beasts, meaning somewhere in the Dark Souls universe there's a spell that turns humans into ambulatory treasure boxes with teeth, and somebody thought that was a reasonable security system. The the sound design makes it worse. That wet breathing noise they make before attacking, suggesting organic lungs inside a wooden chest, biological tissue merged with inanimate objects. They drop good loot because, of course they do. From Software wants you to fight them despite knowing it's a trap, turning every treasure chest in the game into a gambling decision. And in Dark Souls 3, they added the giant chain mimics that have even more teeth and can grab you for a multi-hit eating animation that plays out your character getting digested in real time. So, we've covered experiments, mutations, drownings, cannibalism, and traps. But all of these connect to one core mystery that explains why any of this horror exists in the first place. The cycle. Everything in Dark Souls, every atrocity and nightmare, traces back to Gwyn's choice to link the first flame and artificially extend the Age of Fire. He branded humans with the Dark Sign to prevent the Age of Dark, creating the undead curse that traps people in an endless cycle of death and resurrection until they lose their minds. The curse isn't natural, it's a failsafe Gwyn installed to make sure humanity could never fully embrace the dark soul they inherited from the furtive pygmy. Every time someone dies, they lose a bit of their humanity and get closer to going hollow, turning into a mindless, aggressive zombie that attacks anything nearby. And the only way to reverse it is by killing others and stealing their humanity, creating a system where survival requires murder. Seath experimented on people because the curse made immortality seem achievable. Pinwheel tried necromancy because death stopped being permanent. Ulasile dug up Manus looking for power to break the cycle. New Londo flooded because the Abyss offered an alternative to Gwyn's fire. Aldrich ate gods because the linking of the flame created a hierarchy worth consuming. Smaug betrayed his partner because the undead curse made morality feel negotiable. The mimics exist because in a world where treasure is the only reliable progression and death is temporary, even chests become predators. Every disturbing mystery in Dark Souls stems from this one decision by a god who refused to let his age end naturally. And the result is a world where hope itself is just another form of torture. You're not saving this world by linking the flame, you're just adding more fuel to a cycle that turns everything it touches into horror. If you enjoyed this video and want to see Dark Souls' biggest mysteries explained, click the video on the screen.